How's it going, team? So, welcome back to the Average Jacks podcast. We've got a very good friend of mine on, Harry Phillips. Harry is a sports psychologist, and today I wanted to pick his brains and sort of get into what he does as a sports psychologist, or the behavioural science between what he applies to athletes, to himself, and how that can integrate into the real world. The things we talk about, even though from a sports psychology perspective seem to be quite universal, they fit into everyday life, and it's brilliant to get someone's perspective who works in that industry, worked with professional academies, and he's worked in rugby league, with professional teams and their academies and some of their athletes, and to get that understanding of what makes them tick, how he deals with that is just fascinating. It's really interesting listen, especially if you're into sports and stuff like that. But even if you're not, I think you'll still take something really beneficial away from this. If you want to support the podcast, just as I've asked in previous weeks, please leave us a review. That helps so much, and it's free. It won't cost you anything. The other way that you can support me or find out a little bit more about me is if you go over to my website, www.jackmckeenan.co.uk. You can sign up to my weekly newsletter, The Queue, and you can find out about my book, my socials, and everything else that I do. Thank you again for joining me, and I hope you enjoy today's episodes. Peace. What have you done today then?
I've done today. Picked up some new referrals, and then kind of like in stuff. So like I have to contact safeguarding team to like do referrals for serious mental health stuff. So they come into me, and it's probably like more serious. I have to get them referred.
Yeah.
Emailing head of years about kids, all that sort of stuff today.
Nice. Right, so should we just get straight into it, and then we'll just get the ball rolling. So. Some of that I've asked everybody else just to get sort of a background of a bit about yourself, because obviously I know who you are, of course, but not everybody else knows who you are. So, like, who is Harry? Like, what was little Harry like?
So I'm an only child. I'm a village called Blackrod in Bolton.
Accidentally representing.
Yeah. Always loved sport and like getting involved in things. Grew up playing football, rugby league, cricket, all the way through primary school. And as I got into high school, carried on all them three sports, and then towards the top end of high school, so like year 10, got into handball through school. So yeah.
You played like a decent level, didn't you, of like handball?
Yeah, so with handball, it was weird actually, this story. So I was playing handball in PE, and our PE teacher thought that like our year was pretty good. We had he thought we had some players that would be decent at it, so he entered us into the Bolton Schools competition. And we won that. So then we automatically got entered into the Northwest competition. We won that. So that meant we got entered into the North competition. We won that. And then ended up in the Nationals. Not a clue what was going on, really. And we won that too. So yeah, it was like a real life cool running story.
Yeah, that was like literally what I was going to say. It's like proper cool runnings.
Yeah, and then off the back of that, got asked to go for it's kind of like trials for the Northwest of England under 16s. And there's quite a few of us who went to the trials, ended up joining a club called North East Manchester Hawks, based in Oldham. And yeah, so like I'd say my biggest achievement was probably winning under 18s National Cup. That was at the Copper Box, which is what was used as the arena in 2012. And then he also won the men's league as well. So yeah, that was from like the age of 16 to 18. I got into the under 18s training squad when I was 16 too, but I never actually got put onto a tour or anything.
Yeah. The class that though, innit? Like, he was literally just thrust into it, and then just kept going through the levels of it, and then was like playing at a somewhat like essentially a national arena of just.
Oh yeah,
handball.
It was crazy. Like in the national finals for school, some rules I didn't even know. We were getting pulled up for things in the final, and we didn't even know about the rules. It was absolutely crazy.
That's class. So like, obviously you've played sport all of your life, sport's been like an integral part of who you are. So
Yeah.
like the reason you're on today is obviously because of what you do on the side and what you did your masters in your degree, which is sports psychology and like stuff like that. So do you think that it was just sort of a natural segue to you to just pursue sport, and why sort of obviously you was a good level athlete, you competed at a high standard in specific sports and stuff like that. So what sort of changed your mindset to, instead of like pursuing being a professional, as to working in the industry, if that makes sense?
Okay, so kind of going through school, I kind of knew that I liked sport and I liked PE, and then I did PE's GCSE, and it was all right. Like I won't say I loved it, I liked it, and I knew that I was going to go on to like do sixth form, so like A levels, BTEC. So I decided to do A levels. I saw that my sixth form did a psychology A level, and I thought, you know what, that sounds interesting. There was just something that drew me towards it, and I can't tell you what it was. So I did PE at A level as well. There was a psychology module in that, and man, I just absolutely clicked with it. Like it was the only part of A level PE that like I proper would go out my way to revise and stuff like that. I suppose. I mean, it would have been nice to have pursued a career in sport as like I suppose as a pro athlete, but
Yeah, I mean it's the dream in it
just
for
didn't.
everybody.
Yeah, it didn't work. Yeah, it didn't work out that way. And I knew that like a career in sport would be good for me because I was passionate about it and it was something I wanted to do. The handball experience was good. So like we did a qualification on that. At the time, it was called Athlete Apprenticeship in Sport and Excellence. There is something similar now. I can't think of what the name is though, but it's like the equivalent. But that was like at the time you'd go down to near London, and you'd go like every 2-3 months, and you'd be there from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, and you'd have like maybe 4 hours training, so it'd be like two-hour sessions, and then you do like 2 hours of nutrition, S&C, psychology, lifestyle support, all that. And the psychology stuff I did find interesting, and like I feel like it was beneficial to me.
So it was like sort of like an epiphany sort of moment that was like, I've done all these things, I've been around it for all this long, and then sort of come across this subject that you probably like, from my perspective, I've been involved in sport sort of all my life. And I probably never understood or knew about the psychology that went into sport until much later on in life. So
Yeah.
was it sort of when you was going to these things as like 16, 17-year-old, it was like, this is it, like the light just shone out and it was like, this is the one for me?
Yeah, well, it was really unusual. Like, it's not something that's out there in the public domain, is it? Really, like
No, not
it
at
is
all.
more now, I suppose. But like 8 years ago, it just wasn't. Like I suppose you had things like that was touching on mental health in sport, but there was nothing specific to like the subject of psychology and how it's applied in sport. So like there's stuff out there, isn't there, on nutrition, there's stuff out there on S&C, but there was nothing directly out there on sport and psychology. And it was just like a new thing that I'd learned.
Yeah.
And I was like, it seems really interesting. And like I enjoyed doing it more than any other sports science topic
Yeah.
on the course.
I suppose that like what I was sort of going to ask you was sort of
Mm-hmm.
what was the reason of why, like you was interested in this subject, it sort of stuck out to you that it was this new thing that you'd never come across before. But
Yeah.
like obviously we've just mentioned then, it was a great segue that you said that the only thing probably 8 years ago to entry level people like
Yeah.
ourselves like
Mm-hmm.
was mental health in sport. Obviously that's a massive thing now, it's a massive thing in like society and everything. When you sort of knew about like mental health, was it like a personal connection that was like, this is why I want to do this, I want to help people with sort of them getting better athletes, but also how they can sort of control the nerve, because that's what it, not dumbing it down or anything, but there's sort of that aspect in there of like the psychology aspect of like why people bottle under pressure and can't
Mm-hmm.
handle like big game sessions. Was there some sort of past experiences that you'd had, maybe playing at a high level, or people that you'd been around that playing at that high level that like crumbled under pressure and you was like, there must be something you can do, and then, oh wait, here it is, here's what you can do?
Yeah. So I'd say, growing up, in terms of playing sport, I always think, like, looking back now, my ability was a lot higher than, like, my own confidence was. So, like, obviously, I can't go back and change it, but if I'd have, like, had more confidence and I've had more mental tools in terms of, like, the performance psychology side of things, that I'd have probably been able to, like, do better things and achieve more, in every sport, that is.
Yeah.
Um, like, there was times where I'd, like, win awards as kids in teams, but, like, I think I could have gone on and done, like, even more if I'd have had the tools to be able to, increase my own confidence. Yeah, I don't know why. It's just something that I feel like I wouldn't back myself as much as I could have done.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in terms of the choking under the pressure, like you were saying before, weirdly, I think I was always all right under pressure, and I feel like I am all right under pressure. Um, but I do think that comes from like experience. So like as I've gone, like because I've played like a different of sports, if you will.
Hmm.
Um, I've been in a lot of situations and scenarios that have been like quite pressurizing, and then kind of just like adapted to them and got used to that pressure. But I've definitely seen people who have like had all the ability in the world in teams, and when it comes to like the big moments, they do really struggle. It's massive, and you even see it now in the like at the highest of highest levels that people are still affected by pressure, like things like penalty shootouts, goal kickers in rugby.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, there's a lot that goes on.
And I suppose like what we're talking about, I know like obviously it's we're talking about like sports psychology and that, but a lot of these things are universal, aren't they? So like dealing with pressure, coping with big moments and things like that.
Hmm.
So like obviously there is, but like if someone was going for a job interview and in comparison to doing like a penalty shootout, them are two high stakes situations. There's the things that are transferable from sports psychology that are into everyday life that people could benefit from.
Yeah, 100%. I think public speaking's a big one as well, because I feel like that's a naturally pressurizing environment, isn't it? There's a lot going on. There's a lot of
Like
people in the
for
room looking at
yeah.
you. Yeah.
And there's variables in there to like anything could happen. And I think I was actually reading something. It's interesting you said that. I was reading something the other day, and like how everyone's like, "I'm scared of spiders. I'm scared of bees," which is just like a natural fear. But I'm
Mm.
I'm pretty sure what I was reading. It said that like the highest percentage of what people are scared of is the idea of public speaking. Like public speaking being thrown onto them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. Like a lot of the time, it's like I work in a school, so I'm a mental wellbeing worker in a school, and so obviously like the year 11 stuff going through their exams, and the amount of year 11s that have said the thought of the exam is a lot worse than actually being in the exam. It's crazy. But they can't get their head around that no matter how many times they think that and realise that, the thought of the exam is still just as scary each and every time.
Yeah, and I
Um,
suppose it's like pre-match nerves, isn't it? I mean, we play rugby
exactly.
together, and
Hmm.
you're a lot better than me. Like pre-match nerves and stuff. Like I suffer with it, I struggle with it, but I sort of through like speaking to yourself and other people, I use it now as like a positive thing, as like
Yeah.
channeling my energy into it. But
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's all you always walk off and you're like, what was I worried about? It's like if you go to the gym and you see like a horrible workout and you're like, oh my god, that is going to be the worst thing I've ever done in my
Yeah.
life. And you always walk out of it and you're like, you know what, it was grim, but I did enjoy it.
Yeah, 100%. Like just before coming on to speak to you, like speak to you every day normally, but because like this is getting recorded and stuff, like I was naturally nervous. Like I was starting
Yeah,
to think about things that like might be asked to me. It is normal, but it's all right saying it's normal to be nervous about things, but everyone's different, aren't they?
hmm
It'll affect some people more than it'll affect others. Like there's so many different variables that come into the situation, like per day, past experience.
and like you worked with national teams of sport, like
Mhm.
top level academies, things like that. Can you spot someone just through like conversation and be like, you know what, they're probably someone who is going to struggle with pressure or that sort of aspect of things? Like can you just, obviously being in the game now for a few years like you have, can you just pick sort of telltale signs up from people?
Yeah, so just from having conversations, you get a bit of a glimpse in that. Like or even if you do a group session, you'll get like, like there's different personalities in the group. You'll always get the ones that are like, they'll kind of not take over, but they'll answer everything, very confident in how they speak. And then you'll get the ones that are quite quiet. They don't want to answer. They're quite shy from answering. But that's obviously like a different environment to on the pitch. So I have thought sometimes, like, I've assumed someone may be different or more anxious, but then on the pitch they're absolutely fine. It's just like in person in like a social situation. So,
I
yeah.
suppose it's interesting, isn't it, that you can sort of shift that mindset, and I suppose that's a big thing for you, isn't it? Like what you look for in people, especially if you're helping them in like a professional capacity and things like that. And obviously, sport is sort of it's cutthroat, isn't it? Like, at the highest level, even the sort of the level we play at, decisions have to be made by people for like the interest of the team, especially if it's a team sport. But on the other side of that is like the industry itself is actually quite difficult to be in and around and sort of manage, isn't it? And like it's all well and good talking about, like the athletes and things like that, but how do you deal with it, because it's ever changing, isn't it? Like, you see managers get sort of sacked and then their entire team goes as well.
Yeah.
And it's not, obviously it's a domino effect. It's a bit of everything that's caused that issue. But is there sort of any way that you deal with that pressure generally of being like, right, well, some things are out of my control?
Yeah, 100%. So in that situation, yeah, you're 100% right. It is cutthroat. And I suppose my approach to it is what it is in terms of like in sport, you can only do the absolute best that you can do. And to me, like the best way you can do that is by controlling what you can control. So make sure you're doing your job to the best of your ability. You're getting it, you're trying to make an impact on the team, or if you work with individuals, you're trying to have an impact on them. And yeah, you can only kind of cross that bridge when it comes to it. Like worrying about the past, worrying about the future, it's not going to help you in your job now. All you can do is do the best job that you can do in that moment. Hope that you're successful, the team's successful, and if you do lose your job because a manager or a member of staff loses their job, like a I don't know, director, manager, coach, whatever, it is what it is, and you just have to try and build good relationships with those people. And if I don't know, if they might get new opportunities in the future, who knows? If you've got good relationships with them, then you're putting yourself in the best position to create a job for you in the future if you did kind of lose your job.
Yeah, because you see that a lot of them move around, don't they, together? Like they create this sort of
Yeah.
it's like a tribe in it. They find this
Mhm.
community, and
Yeah.
something I was shocked about, obviously, knowing you on like a personal level, and obviously you're working in sport and stuff, just how much sort of networking, just speaking to people off the cuff actually comes into it, and it's probably like from an outsider looking in, it seems to be such a massive part of working in sport, and especially what you do, to just have the confidence to be able to speak to people and be open to making new relationships and taking a chance on yourself.
Yeah. So like, yeah, building relationships is huge. So especially in psychology, say if you was to get a job in psychology, no matter what level it is, no matter what sport it's in, your first few months is just getting to know everyone, building your relationships, building that rapport, kind of mapping out what it is that you're required to do. Like, what do the club want from you? What do the coaches want from you? What do the players want from you? Kind of working out where you're needed, because there's so many different things that you can do, but if you're doing things that aren't required in the environment, then it's not going to get you very far. And yeah, the main thing with that is just building the trust, because it's one of those roles where you've got to have the trust of the players and the coaches to be able to do it well. Just
because
because of the
they
nature of the
confide in
role.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what I said to that.
So, like, obviously, you mentioned then about building trust with the coaches, the players, building these very sort of intimate relationships, probably in personal relationships. And something that interests me, and obviously love to hear your take on it, is one thing you're always told is like, you shouldn't take your work home with you. You shouldn't like, get too close to your colleagues and things like that. But I
Yeah.
imagine in your position and in your role where, some people could be telling you like, the deepest insecurities, why they feel like this,
Yeah.
it's all a part of a bigger picture. How do you keep it sort of, not bringing it home with you and keeping it finding that fine line of professionalism and trust and friendship? Because I imagine that's sort of the line you have to dance.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a few different approaches you've got to this, and a few different ways like we can take this. So in terms of like keeping it like professional and things like that. So if we're talking about sport and exercise psychology, so with that, so going back to like building relationships and stuff at the start, that's where I'd also agree confidentiality. So it's a role where that's one of the first things that's got to be agreed. So that's something that I'd usually agree with coaches, and kind of work out what it is, how we're going to do confidentiality. So is it going to be open confidentiality where anything said between me and players is shared, or is it going to be closed confidentiality where anything said between me and the players is kept between me and them, unless like it might be like a safeguarding issue or something like that. Also, though, you've got so going back to you saying taking your work home with you, because like sport and like it's something that I'm interested in everyday life, and like it's like reading books on psychology, reading books on sport. That side of things, like I'm always interested in sport and psychology just because it's something that like I'm quite passionate about. Taking work home in that sense isn't too much of an issue. But in terms of like the confidentiality and stuff, then yeah, like sticking to that is important. I don't think there's anything wrong with having like friends from work outside of work, as long as like I suppose you're not dragging incidents that should be kept at work. As long as that's staying in the work environment, yeah, that's what I'd say. That's what I'd say in terms of sport, anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And like with being sort of in your position and speaking to people and, like not rooting around, that's a terrible way of putting it, but you're like you're digging deeper into
Yeah.
what they're giving you. And I imagine that can be quite heavy sometimes, and
Hmm.
you're sort of taking that burden onto somebody. So obviously you've got your own sort of well-being and your own like mental health and stuff that be considerate of. Is the things that you do, you know, if you're in that situation and that feeling, to sort of decompress, bring yourself back to a level, and sort of again, we've just explained that you leave things at work and don't bring them home with you, but there's
Mm.
obviously an emotional sort of pressure tank that we all have, and I imagine being in that role, it boils up pretty quick. So what do you do to sort of release some pressure out of that in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, yeah. So like, there's a few ways that I could do this. So I'm a line my line manager at work, or if it's with a sports club, like that's that person who you know that you'll be able to speak to about that. Yeah, like some people might be embarrassed to speak about sort of stuff with people at work, but I think it's important because obviously, like if someone doing my jobs is struggling that in terms of like their well-being, then you're not going to be able to do your job properly. Yeah, I'm looking at like I've got like my girlfriend who I can speak to as well, my mum and dad. They're very supportive that way. So if there's anything that I needed to talk about, then yeah, they'd definitely listen to me that way. And that obviously like my friends and stuff, like I'm sure I spoke to you loads of times about things that have bothered me at work.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, yeah, I just think like talking about things is way better than not talking about things. If you're not a talker, then there's different ways you can do it. Journaling's a good way you can do it. Making notes on it, or even just spending like 10, 15 minutes and just going, you know what, I'm just going to think about all the stuff that's on my mind right now, and I'm going to just keep thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it until like you've processed it better.
Yeah,
Um,
almost like a meditative state, like just instead of like
yeah,
thinking about nothing and being mindful, you're almost just concentrating all of that energy into sort of processing it, which is cool. I've
yeah,
never, obviously I speak to you every day, but I've never heard that take on it before, and that's interesting.
yeah. So you kind of like you're just accepting it then, in terms of like trying to accept it. So you kind of just it's like facing your fears. You just go, you know what, I'm going to think about nothing else but all the negative stuff that's in my mind right now, and that way you might process it better. Then you might be able to move on. Uh,
Yeah, you're
Whereas
just
if you're
dealing with the
trying to
shit.
avoid it, it's you're kind of suppressing it, and it's just going to keep coming back up. Imagine if like a float going into the water and it keeps
Yeah,
going back up to the surface.
it's that pressure tank again, isn't it? It's
Mhm.
not releasing it. It's not letting that out.
Yeah.
Letting that. Obviously, there's some
Mhm.
great ways, like you mentioned, having a good sort of support group around you, of like your girlfriend, your mum and dad, your friends, having that sort
Yeah.
of community that you can have, and then obviously these techniques of like how to sort of release it, which is obviously from my perspective of what I'm interested in and what I'm trying to do. I suppose that what you just said then, I've never thought about it like that, as opposed to just approaching it head on and tackling it. So there's probably definitely people who haven't as well, who, you know, hopefully listen to this and be able to take that away. So like you've just mentioned then, obviously the things you do and the things you give to, you know, people you work with in your job, and then athletes you work with. So do you sort of, you've got all this, you know, you did your masters in it, you've done your degree and stuff in that, you've learned probably lots of theories and methods to apply. Like, do you sort of practice what you preach? Can you sort of, do you apply methods to yourself before you play on Saturday, or you go into a big presentation? Do you sort of channel into the things you know and apply them to yourself as well?
Yeah, wow. There's a few ways here. So of exercise. So in terms of exercise, like, you know, it's beneficial to, you're more motivated to exercise if you're training with someone, for example. That's just a simple way of motivating yourself. Another one, exercising in nature. Let's go with exercising at a moderate intensity as well. So like probably if you was imagining if you was going for a run at a jogging speed, so you're not sprinting, you're not walking, it's like in between. So even if I'm just doing one of them, I know that I'm giving myself the best chance to enjoy exercise more than I am if I just, I don't know, go to the gym and just kind of wing it sort of thing. So I know that if I'm more motivated, I'm going to enjoy it more. But yeah, that's one way that's just a simple, like, basic exercise psychology of keep yourself motivated. In terms of sport, so you've got mental skills, techniques, like you've got goal setting, you've got visualization and imagery, you've got self-talk, you've got breathing techniques. So for me personally, imagery is a huge one. So like the night before a game, or say if I had a job interview, like the night before a job interview, I'll just be like going over different scenarios in my head. So like in terms of rugby, there might be some scenarios that I give myself where like I'm really tired, it's towards the end of the game, but like it's just like one big last push, like we might be winning, and I'm going through in my head like what it feels like to be in that situation. So like I'm trying to make myself nervous, I'm trying to make myself like to like imagine how it's going to feel when I'm really tired, in cramp, all sorts of things like that, and just give myself scenarios to make it as realistic as possible. But when the time comes, if I'm in that situation, it feels like I've already been in it before.
Yeah, so you're in familiar waters rather than sort of uncharted territories.
Yeah, exactly that.
So you mentioned then about, you know, journaling, but obviously, like we know now in some more modern times and recent times that sort of journaling's a massive thing for, you know, your own well-being and stuff like that. So how does that sort of look in sport? How does journaling look to, you know, an athlete trying to motivate themselves, keep themselves disciplined, prepare for, you know, them situations?
Okay, so you've got there's loads of different things that you could do. So when we say journaling, Jack, I'm thinking you need is a pen and a piece of paper, don't you? Or your notes app on your phone.
Yeah, definitely.
So it could be that an athlete set themselves some goals and they just want to write out the goals, and it's just emphasizing what the goals are. Because obviously, in a pressurized situation, it might sound a bit stupid, but it's very easy to forget what your goals are. So writing it down before you go out to play could just be a nice little reminder for you. I suppose if someone in a high pressure situation, they might be like, "Well, you know what? It's a game. To me and you, it's a game of rugby at the end of the day. I've still got family. I've got my friends. If it was to lose, well, we've got loads of other games to play. So it's not necessarily the be all and end all, even for the season, let alone like the be all and end all for you, like as a person. So you could just write down 3 things that you're grateful for before a game. It could be that someone's having negative thoughts, so they go, you know what? I'm going to write down some negative thoughts that I'm having, and it might be that you list 10. You rip the page out the book, or if it's a piece of paper, you screw it up, you put it in the bin. I don't know. That's your negative thoughts gone, then, isn't it? That's one way of. That's an outlook that someone might have. Might not work for some people. It might work for others. Yeah, they're 3 good ones that I'd say that I have spoken about with different athletes.
Yeah, that one's like super interesting. Writing it down and screwing it up and sort of having it's like that cognitive relationship with it, that you're actually getting it out there. You've addressed it, and then you're like, "Fuck it, done now."
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
it. That all of them are now gone, and it's like wiping the slate clean. But it's interesting that you mentioned, obviously, about, you know, gratitude journaling, and like again, this is sort of why I wanted to chat to you, because I think it's so so important to realise how universal all these things are. You know, that like these sports scenarios and the things that work in sport work in everyday life as well. Because gratitude journaling is a massive thing. That's something I've talked about, you know, like on my socials and in the book and things. It's so beneficial. It's so beneficial to sort of reassure yourself of what you have got. I think in today's society we can look at things in quite a negative light, and you know, we always want more, we always want it now. We're sort of always on social media looking at, you know, the best of what people portray. So when we're feeling like shit and we're seeing, you know, the best of people's lives, it makes us feel more shit. You know, this is nothing revolutionary what I'm talking about, but when you do gratitude journal, which is something that I've only sort of implemented myself probably in the last 18 months, is like, it's such a weight like lifted off you, because you're like, even if it's just 3 things a day, you know, you have 3. Everyone probably has 3 things they're grateful for.
Yeah.
And you put that in your mind over and over again, and it'll just change your relationship with things. Like, obviously, that's me coming from no sort of, you know, I've not done degrees or anything, but is that what it does? Is it building them pathways in your brain to be like, look, you might think this, but in reality, this is what you've got.
Yeah, well, it helps with it can help with purpose as well, because sometimes it's kind of easy to forget. Like, there could be things that we're grateful for that in the back of our mind we don't realize we're actually grateful for, because we're in the same kind of routine every day, and things happen, don't they? And it's kind of one of them things that once you adapt and you get used to a situation, so it might be like you get a new job, and then for the first 3 months you're absolutely buzzing with your new job, but then after that point it becomes the norm, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, then if someone was to say, right, well, take that job away, like, automatically you've gone, right, I've lost my job, I've no money. You might have friends at work, you might have benefits, like staff benefits at your job. I've just lost them.
Yeah.
And automatically, like, it kind of brings you back down to earth and makes you realize, well, actually, like, yeah, I am kind of grateful for the situation I'm in.
It's not taking things for granted, is it? And I suppose
Yeah,
when you're working with athletes, you know, professionals and things like that, when it becomes their day job, it's sort of probably, you know, when you're a kid and you dream of running out for your hometown club, and you know,
yeah,
playing, scoring the goal or scoring the try, seeing the crowd, but you never think about the shit aspects of it. You never think about losing the game, or you know, going to your biggest rivals and getting dicked and the fans booing you and stuff. But that's like what you said. It's sort of the honeymoon phase in it with everything. We have our peaks and troughs through it. Athletes have to go through that as well, don't they? And then I suppose for
yeah.
them to write down what they're grateful for, it sort of reassures them and reminds them, like, yeah, this is a good gig that I've got. Like, I'm a professional rugby player, I'm a professional football player. You know, people dream of this, and I'm doing it, which I
Yeah,
imagine's completely
100%.
mad.
Yeah, and another one with athletes, it could be like you could potentially be 1 game away from injury, which is like a big one that affects a lot of athletes because it comes as a shock to them, and they've never been injured in their life before, and the first injury is like a career ender. So yeah, it's tough, but the best way to, if people struggle with gratitude, I'd say the best way to do it is kind of what life would be like without a certain something, whatever that might be. So if you was to take things away and you sit back and realize what life would be like without that, then kind of like that's again where your imagination comes into play. It might be like a negative, it might be kind of like a negative outlook on something, but then it brings like that it shows you the realization of having those things in life and like the positive impact that things have in our lives too.
Yeah, so you just like we've just mentioned injury, and like we'll get back to that because obviously I reckon me and you could probably write books on injuries. I mean, I'm made out of
Yeah,
wet
100%.
rice paper, but you just said about imagination and imagery and things like that. Have you ever come across someone? Is like the imagination a big factor of psychology? And if so, have you ever come across someone who, you know, has a shit imagination and struggles with this? And
So
then
yeah,
what do you do with that?
well, you'll quite often you'll say to someone, you'll ask them, do they use imagery? And a lot of the time their answers will be, no, I don't think it's not something that I use. So then if you ask the question, okay, so have you ever had negative thoughts before a game? And the answer will be yeah. So then you'll say to them, all right then, so give me an example of a negative thought that you have, and they might be like, so we'll stick with rugby, knocking on from kickoff, all right, and then you'll ask the question, okay, so are you telling me you've not imagined knocking on from kickoff then? And they'll be like, oh, yeah. So it's like a realization that, like, without even realizing, they're kind of using imagery. Obviously, that's negative imagery. So if that's the case with someone, it's likely they've kind of learned use their imagination in that way. So like the
in a
visualizing
negative
negative
way.
things. So you've kind of got to practice it like you would with exercise. So you've got to change that. So you've got to be like, right, so it could be a little task. So 10 times I'm going to imagine the ball cleanly from kickoff and making that scenario a successful one. Because again, that goes back to you kind of if you're retraining your mind to be positive about something, then the chances are that when it comes to the actual thing, you're giving yourself the best chance that it's going to be successful. Whereas if you've imagined a negative outcome from a scenario, it's more likely to happen when it actually comes to the situation that you're imagining.
Yeah, it's class. Like, I remember you doing it with me for weightlifting, because I remember being like, nah, I don't use imagery. And then like after about 2 minutes of having a clip, and you was like, you use imagery all the time. And you probably don't even realise you do it. So like going back to injury, what we mentioned before. So I imagine that's probably, I might be wrong, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I imagine that's probably the biggest difference from like general population to athletes, is sort of dealing with the fear of injury and then coming back from injury. And like if someone's obviously had a horrendous, let's take like Harvey Elliott a couple of seasons ago, like he shattered his ankle, dislocated, fractured it and that, but then was back within 10 months or something mental like that. Like what would be sort of the steps a psychologist would try and sort of put in place to ensure that the fear isn't there? Because I mean, we've been in situations that I've got a dud shoulder, and it's all I think about when I play. Like I have to really focus on not getting sort of up about it. So like, if you was talking to me, in a couple of months when I'm back and I'm training, like what would be the signpost to be like, this is what you need to do to not be concerned, but not let it consume you and let it sort of ruin your recovery and you coming back into sport.
Yeah, so it's kind of like once a big injury happens. So let's say like Harvey Elliott, for example, it's usually like similar to grief. So like you'll kind of go through the stages of grief, similar to like someone would be like if someone close to them was to die. Kind of like what you'd see initially when there's like an injury that's happened. But then when it comes to kind of like the recovery and like the rehab and coming back, like returning to play, there is going to be confidence issues because like it's kind of like it's an experience that's happened. So like if we're trying to take like learning experiences from different situations we've been in, we are going to take some negative ones, aren't we? I suppose it's kind of just like retraining your body to kind of like work hand in hand together. So if you've been in an injury, then it's kind of like once you've got to a stage where you can almost start training again, it's coming back into that kind of at the right speed and like time and everything right. So obviously when you do rehab and physio, this is considered by the physios and the sports therapists and stuff. But it's hard to, so like psychologically it could be that you're doing different exercises that are mimicking what you might be doing in your sport. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the confidence is going to 100% be there.
Mm-hmm.
But you've kind of got to go out your way and be like, right, okay, well, what's the scenario that's worrying me? And kind of just think about it. What's bothering me? Am I scared that? So if it's a broken leg, are you thinking, right? Well, what if my leg's weak? What if what if I do this and I get re-injured? Or what if like I've been compensating on my other leg because I've broken my other one and things like that. So it's important if you're going through rehab, speak these through with your physio. If it's a surgeon, speak these through with your surgeon and kind of get the reassurance from them. That's when you can kind of look to psychology. Like that's where you've kind of got to. So let's say if it's a footballer, it could be that you start tackling with an exercise ball because it's soft. So it could be like you're kicking that against the wall and you kind of like getting used to the feeling of like the proprioception kind of things.
Yeah. So it's like it's starting at a regression and sort of building yourself up slowly, which again is
Yeah, and kind of you're building trust with that injury again, essentially.
yeah.
So you're kind of starting as though you've never played football before, and you'd build your way up to the level where you feel confident enough to return.
Yeah, I mean that's like again interesting how it's everything just seems to transfer. I think there's sort of a perception of athletes and sports and stuff that they're not human. Do you know what I mean? That might sound stupid. I might be coming across with a completely
100%.
mental point, but like people sort of see them as well. I mean, some people see them as superheroes. Do you know what I mean? Like what they do and everything
Yeah.
like that. But they're not the human beings at the end of the day, and sort of that's where you come in, isn't it? As like a psychologist to sort of channel them sort of feelings and emotions that they have, because if they're playing at the highest standard, they've probably not got the sort of the reach that a normal person has, because it's not like they can turn up to a group. They might just be like, if especially like professionals and well known,
Mm-hmm.
the sort of, did you ever notice like do they ever feel alienated, like is there studies and stuff that they sort of feel trapped of like their own grandiose, essentially, if that makes sense.
So in my experience, yeah. So like in terms of identity, um, I'd say there's quite a lot of athletes who are quite good at kind of seeing sport as kind of just like one compartment of the life. So, like, say if you was to put on a scale of 1 to 100, they see like 20% of it as sport, 20% family, 20% friends. Could be 20% of a different hobby and 20% of a training to do a job for life after rugby. But then I suppose you'll get the other ones that are kind of like it's sport, 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 and especially at an academy level, like those are the people that when they don't make it, they find it really hard because all they've ever known is sport. They've been told by the parents, "You're going to be a professional athlete. That's your life now." And when it doesn't happen, it's kind of like, wow, what is like my purpose now? Because I've not made it as what I've always dreamt of doing. Where there's kind of a more like humanistic approach. So it's like sports just one aspect of my life. Then you've got all the other things that like give you purpose and will motivate you to do other things. And kind of being in sport and being rejected will push you to whatever you do next in your life. Like it'll make you much stronger going along the journey, essentially, because you've got those experiences, the experience of rejection, and you know what interests you and what job you might want to do after rugby, and it's only going to make you better going forward for doing that.
But like mentioning rejection is sort of we have this perception that failure is a bad thing, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not really, is it? I mean, it gives you the tools to sort of progress in whatever you're doing or in new avenues. Do you find that sort of working with these academy players, because being around sport and especially like rugby from the sport that we're in, you
Yeah.
find the people who sort of, rip it up from being like 12 years old to 18, 19 years old and then
Mm.
don't make it, they've probably never sensed rejection, have they? I don't
No.
want to like speak out of turn. So when you're working in them, like them academies and things like that, is there a place for sort of not negativity, but is there a place of being like, be prepared for things not going your way, be prepared for shit hitting the fan? Like you've obviously had it very good up until this point. Obviously they've worked very hard, they're naturally gifted in
Mm.
that. But like, is there a place for sort of a slight element of maybe things could go wrong and we need to be mentally prepared for that?
Yeah. So this is something that, like, if I've got control over dealing with this sort of issue with the players, then you've kind of just got to state facts. Um, you've got to put to them what I can't remember what it is, but what's the percentage of players that make it. So you work out the percentage. You look at the people in the room. Let's say it was 20%. Okay, and there's 40 kids in the room. You'd be like, right, that's 8 of you that
Good maths.
will make it. So it's like that instantly. It's like you'll get eyes looking around, thinking, no. Um, so that's one way of doing it. you've also got the chances of injury. If you put that to them, again, it's a real shock, because it's like, wow, that's crazy. Like the percentage of people that will get career-ending injuries, especially before the age of 18, is massive. And I think educating the parents is big as well, because the parents are going to get it into the players the best, because they're trusted the most by the players, aren't they? They spend the most time with them. They have those conversations with them. So if the parents can get that into the intel that's playing whatever sport it is, then you're giving them the best opportunity to kind of make them resilient towards rejection. And like when rejection comes, all right, yeah, it will be sad, it'll be hard. They might really find it hard to deal with, but
it's not the be all and end all, is it?
You're giving them the tools you're giving them the best opportunity to be able to move on and from it in a positive way.
Yeah, resilience is massive, isn't it? I think it's something that we need in day-to-day life and just generally speaking. So it's probably funny because, like you said, I said it then about the fly through up into the academy and things like that, and then you sort of you're able to shed light as to actually the reality of you're with now. You're in a pool of the best, and then there's obviously going to be the pool of elite within that, and then in that, the 1%. Something I find, even through I've been a swimming teacher in the past, and that's nothing like working with up and coming academy athletes, but the pressure that parents put onto kids is fucking mental, and it's like it's awful. Why do you think that is? Is it is it sort of living their dream vicariously through the kid, or I want to make them a football player, so I have no financial sort of. And I don't even think they know they do it. I'm not a parent.
No, 100%.
But do you think do you have to train the parents as well as the athletes? Like, is there anything that you do to try and sort of the circle in?
Yeah, so 100% right with that. There's the amount of parents that'll try and be reliving their dream through the child is crazy. And kind of like trying to educate parents on that, you've got to kind of like approach sensitively, because you want to be going in with the approach of like you're a bad parent, because obviously, well, I'm not a parent myself for starters, but you've kind of got to provide the education as if to say like this has got to kind of be if the child doesn't want to be doing this, then the chances are they're not going to stick at it. There's evidence out there to show that like if someone's not internally motivated by something, they will not stick at it. And like the fact, like that's the same as the financial issue with, like, say you wanted your child to be a footballer. It's like the chance of them making it, if that's what you want, and the child doesn't want to be a footballer, it's very, very, very slim chances of that happening, because like they're not going to want to train, they're not going to want to be at the highest level, they're not going to want to make the sacrifices to get to the highest level if they don't want to be there in the first place. And also, like, if you're living your dream through your child that you failed to make, then you're just adding pressure on. So again, you're already putting like a barrier up to that child making it at the highest level.
Yeah, it's dead interesting to sort of hear it from someone who knows what they're talking about it, and like the actual sort of knock-on effect that has, because it's so sort of, like I said, it's prevalent, isn't it, in sport, and you sort of see 100%. Like 6-year-old kids getting bollockings off the dads because they're picking up dandelions on a footy pitch and stuff like that. Like, that's mad. That's crazy.
100%.
Especially, and like you said, then when you're not a parent, so it must be like navigating a minefield, I imagine.
Yeah, 100%. Like you were saying before, like the kind of elements of psychology, like the applicable to other areas of life, like job interviews, public speaking and stuff like that. Like, that's where I think the approach of, if it's with a child, like the development of the person is the most important thing rather than the development of the kid at the sport. Because like if anything, take away from it that like it's a learning experience for the kid, the socializing with other kids, the listening to a coach, they could be the things that like make a child go on and grow up and be successful in a job, just from like turning up to amateur football training on a Tuesday night in the pouring down rain.
Yeah,
you're building the resilience, like all those sort of things, the things that they can learn and take from that. It doesn't have to be. So say if it's football, it doesn't have to be making them a better footballer, but you kind of like developing the skills as a person. If you take 100%. That approach, then it will help a lot with kind of the relationship the parent has with a child in general, not just for how successful they're going to be at the sport.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that about how sort of formative being in sport is. I mean, I'm definitely a product of being in sport all of my life and having sort of confidence to be able to speak to people and put myself sort of out there and do things that I'm not comfortable with, and I mean, I'm not perfect, you know what I mean? Sometimes I'll throw my toys at the pram if things don't go my way, as you know. And like I still like winning. I think it drives that sort of competitive nature in you, but it definitely builds resilience. I mean, you know, when you're 9 years old, like I said, it pissing down rain, and you've just been pumped 36-0 in a 15-minute match off the next last half. Yeah. Trust me, my football team did, mate. But you know, I was saying like there was one of us picking daisies. There was probably like 9 of us picking daisies. Yeah, mate. Yeah, bagels for hands, lad. But but like that sort of reminded me that, you know, it's not the end of the world. Obviously, you want to win, but and that's it, and it's going back to them things of sort of remembering it's actually a privilege to sort of go out and play rugby every Saturday and do that and have a group of mates that you can do that with and have a laugh.
Yeah, 100%.
Sorry, just coughing my guts up. But yeah, going on to something that I've asked everybody else, and obviously would like to get your perspective of it because you've obviously been involved in, you know, behavioural science and psychology and that. What you alluded to it slightly before, maybe more thinking now about the general person and not an athlete. What like 3 habits or routines would you say would transfer well into like everyday life for someone?
Okay, well, firstly, I'd just say make time every day, even if it's just 10, 15 minutes to do something that you enjoy. Wake up in the morning thinking, I'm looking forward to doing that. And just no matter how busy work is, no matter how busy life is, make sure like it's non-negotiable that you're going to go out your way and like do something that you enjoy, whether it's reading a book, whether it's taking a bath, whether it's going for a walk, whether it's watching a film, or a video, anything like that. So yeah, that's one thing I'd do. Next thing I'd say is if you feel like there's any negative habits that you have in your life, try and replace those with a positive one. I can't think of any examples, but it could be that like if someone does something every day and they know they do it, and it bothers them, then just try and do something that's like as not similar, because the chances are it's going to be hard to find something similar that's a positive switch, and replace a negative habit with a positive habit, if you get what I mean by that. So it could be that if you get the lift every day at work, you go, you know what, I'm just going to get the stairs, because that way you kind of put in positive changes and you learn how to make positive changes to your life. So I'd say that is an important one. Struggling. 2 main ones, I'd say.
Two is more than enough, man. But yeah, I mean, that one's a good one. They said about like, and I'm glad you give sort of an example because I was going to ask you anyway, but like, that's a massive one, and sort of teaching yourself to have the sort of mindfulness that this habit isn't essentially positive or isn't, it isn't positive. It's negative or on the verge of like, you know, stagnant, which again, I think can be as sort of damning as a negative one. Like you said, that's a good example of that. Like I get the lift every day. Like it's probably in your mind, you're probably like, it's not going to make that much of a difference if I change that. But actually, when you look at the alternative, it is going to make a massive difference in the long run. So that's a really good one for like giving people sort of the opportunity to try and assess what is negative in their life. Is there a way from like a psychology perspective or like a behavioural perspective that people can? Is there any exercises that you're aware of that people could maybe do? Like you said, you mentioned about writing stuff down before, where they can try and pinpoint them negative things or stagnant habits or routines in their life. Putting you on the spot again.
No, it's fine. Journaling, I think, is a great one because you're kind of proving that that's a negative thing to yourself. And I'd say a massive one is just talk about it. Like, no, like the chances are someone's not going to judge you for you discussing your negative habits with them. Like, just it's if you can kind of discuss it, you might speak to someone and be like, well, you know, they might go, you know what, like I do the same or I do something similar.
Yeah.
So like that way, you kind of like to relate. You can relate. There's someone that you can relate to. It's a big
Yeah.
thing, that, because then you don't feel as like isolated about the situation.
Yeah, you don't feel alone, do you? Which is a massive thing of like, again.
Yeah, like for example, you've got that links back. So there's a theory in exercise psychology called the self-determination theory, and it's a theory of intrinsic motivation, and like relatedness is one of them. Just like about like interacting with people and kind of speak with people and kind of feeling that other people are on your wavelength. Another one's autonomy, so that's like having choice and having control in your decisions. So kind of like if it's exercise, it might be like, well, I don't like exercise, but I don't mind walking. So you might go, right, I'm going to choose to walk, because that way you've chosen to do it. So you're more likely to stick at it. Competent. So that's like, we'll stick with exercise because the theory is about exercise, but like picking an exercise where it's not too hard for you, so that like you do it once and it's like, right, that was traumatizing, not doing that again. But it's also not too easy, so you're not bored. So you're not
Me
like
playing football when I was 9.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 2 goals every minute.
Yeah. Coming in like one of the basketball games in an arcade, just through.
Yeah. So yeah, so competence is big as well. Yeah, make sure you're picking something that's at your level, or if you're struggling to find that, then contact, like if it is exercise, try and find a coach that's going to help you find your level of fitness and exercise. Use the RPE scale. So that's a scale of like how hard's the exercise on a scale of 1 to 10. If it's around 6 and 7, then yeah, you're on the right tracks.
The class, mate, they're all like, good things that I think people can sort of relate to and implement in the day-to-day life, and use these sort of proven methods in sport, but again, are universal into everyone. And I'm glad you mentioned about sort of speaking to people and trying to relate to people, because essentially this is the aim of what this podcast is. It's trying to show people that even though we're all different, we're all very similar in how we do things, how we approach things, but then we all have these sort of individual, unique trinkets of information that, like I said, I've spoken to you now. I've known you, years, and we speak every day probably, but there's been stuff that we've spoken about today that, have like resonated with me and that I can probably take away and apply to my sort of day-to-day life. So there's some really good ones. One thing that I like asking people, and I found is a good one and sort of puts them on the spot a little bit, is what habit would you love to introduce to your life or reintroduce into your routine / life? Like, is there one habit that comes to mind that you did that you like wish I still did that, or one that you like, I wish I could get that into my routine?
Yeah, so this isn't something that I have done like religiously in the past, but I'm going to say reading. So like, I do find it hard, I'll be honest. I find it hard to motivate myself to read. So whether that's like reading like a journal article on sport or exercise psychology, or whether it's reading a book that I'm interested in, I feel like when I've read a book or when I've read something, like I do feel like I feel really clear. It's weird. It's kind of like I've chilled out. Like, do you know this feeling you get after you've exercised? It's very similar to that. I feel like after I've done that, I can really be productive, and like my cognitive function improves massively by doing that. So yeah, I'd say reading.
That's class,
Something as
man.
basic as that.
And like, I can so relate to what you've just said about the feeling that it gives you when you've read something or been reading something. I mean, for me, one of my probably since being 18, probably, and I'm getting on a bit now, lad. So we're coming up to 10 years on that mark, which you think about, it's a long time. But reading is probably one of my most ingrained habits, because it's the only thing. I'm a terrible sleeper. Always been a terrible sleeper. But it's the only thing that shuts me off. It's the only thing that makes me sort of relax. Like, even if it's like, I like reading things in the day. So, non-fiction things like about habits, the behaviour, anything, history. But at night I read novels and things like that. And I love a serial killer novel, mate. Like, freak myself out, but it still gets me sleep. So there's definitely something there that just it's meditative. I think it's probably the closest thing that I can put my finger on to meditating.
Yeah, 100%.
But not meditating.
Yeah, because you think if you're reading, your thoughts and you're focusing like it's all in the book, isn't it? So you kind of, if anything, you're distracting your mind from other thoughts, and that's when like people read and it's not going in, it's usually because there is other thoughts. But if you can get like yourself to focus on that book and the concentration's all in that book, then you're giving your mind that rest from like kind of like the cognitions in your brain going round and round thinking about things.
Yeah, and that's definitely why I sort of moved away from like non-fiction before bed.
Yeah.
I was really interested in the topic and sort of everything that was in it, but I was trying to get myself to sleep. I was trying to get myself in a state where I was like going to sleep. So it was counterintuitive to do that. But then when I made that switch, when I made that switch from non-fiction to fiction, game changer, mate, game changer. So I'm glad it's not just me that finds, you've had that experience and benefit from reading, and reading's definitely a cool one that, people, I recommend to anyone. They should try and read. We've been doing it for thousands of years in some capacity as humans, so it's definitely something that's wired into us, I think, naturally. But yeah, that's a cool one. I like that one. But yeah, mate, so thank you very much. Thanks for giving us. We've done an hour again, flown by. It's mad how these things just fly through. Where can people find you? What services do you have available? Just give yourself a little bit of a plug so people can reach out to you.
So I offer sport and exercise psychologist support. So whether you're an athlete, a coach, a personal trainer, and I can offer my services to those sorts of people. I do have an Instagram page, and you'll find that it's at Mind Gains Psychology.
Cool, great stuff, mate. Thank you for coming on, and it's been a pleasure. Yeah. I'll speak to you very soon. Take it easy, mate. Thank you.
Bye.